Welcome back to Recap It. Today we are going to recap 1983 mafia movie titled Scarface. Tony Montana and his close friend Manny build a strong drug empire in Miami. However, as his power begins to grow, so does his ego and his enemies, and his own paranoia begins to plague his empire. But before we begin, please consider subscribing to this channel. Now, without wasting any further time, let's begin, shall we? As part of the Mariel boat lift in 1980, Cuban refugee and ex-convict Tony Montana lands in Miami, Florida, and is transferred to a refugee camp with his closest buddy Manny Ray and their pals Angel and Chi Chi. In exchange for murdering a former Cuban commander at the request of Miami drug lord Frank Lopez, the four are released and handed green cards. They work as dishwashers in a restaurant, but Tony is dissatisfied and declares that he is intended for more. Omar Suarez, Frank's right-hand man, sends the four to Colombia to get cocaine from Colombian dealers. However, the sale goes wrong when Tony and Angel are apprehended. Tony is forced to watch as Angel is dismembered with a chainsaw by the dealers, just before Manny and Chi Chi arrive to save Tony. The Colombians are then killed. Tony and Manny insist on personally bringing the recovered drugs and money to Frank, suspecting that Omar set them up. Tony is drawn to Frank's trophy wife, Elvira, during their meeting. Following that, Frank recruits Tony and Manny. Tony later reunites with his mother and younger sister Gina, overprotective of whom he is. His mother, disgusted by his criminal lifestyle, kicks him out. Manny has feelings for Gina, but Tony warns him not to approach her. Tony and Omar are dispatched to Cochabamba, Bolivia, to meet with drug lord Alejandro Sosa. Omar gets irritated when Tony negotiates a contract without Frank's agreement during the meeting. Later, Sosa tells Tony that Omar is a police informant and that Frank has poor judgment. Tony sees a beaten man. Omar was found hanging from a helicopter. Tony, unconcerned with Omar's execution because he blames him for Angel's death, endorses Frank's group. Sosa, who has taken a fancy to Tony, agrees to the agreement, but only after warning Tony not to betray him. Back in Miami, Frank is furious about Omar's death and Tony's unauthorized deal. Tony soon establishes his own cocaine distribution business. Mel Bernstein, a dishonest police investigator on Frank's payroll, tries to extort money from Tony in exchange for police protection at a nightclub. Tony sees Gina having an affair with a man and knocks both of them up when he watches him grope her. After that, hitmen attempt to assassinate Tony, who is injured but manages to flee. He confronts Frank and Bernstein, knowing that they were behind the attack. Frank confesses his involvement and begs for his life under duress, but Tony has Manny shoot him dead before executing Bernstein. Tony marries Elvira and becomes Sosa's product distributor, leveraging his riches to develop a multi-million-dollar business empire in a vast, heavily guarded home. Tony gets charged with tax evasion and faces an imminent prison sentence after a sting operation by federal authorities in 1983. Sosa offers to keep Tony out of prison by using his government connections, but only if Tony assassinates an activist who is about to expose Sosa's drug operations. Tony accuses Manny of instigating his arrest and Elvira of being an infertile junkie during dinner at a posh restaurant. Elvira eventually leaves him. Tony travels to New York City with Sosa's henchman Alberto, dubbed the Shadow, to carry out the killing. Alberto puts a radio-controlled explosive under the activist's automobile. Tony tries to call off the hit as the activist is unexpectedly joined by his wife and children. Tony kills Shadow before he can explode the explosives because he refuses to back down. Tony travels to Miami, where he is contacted by a furious Sosa, who threatens him with retaliation for allowing the activist to give the exposé. On his mother's orders, Tony seeks down Gina and discovers her with Manny. Enraged, Tony shoots Manny dead, following which Gina tearfully informs Tony that they were married the day before. Tony returns home with Gina, upset, and begins a major cocaine binge in his office. Sosa's men raid the mansion shortly after, killing all of Tony's guards. Chi-Chi is slain in the ensuing attack. Gina accuses Tony of wanting her for himself and fires at him as a result. The woman is then killed by one of Sosa's men, who is then killed by Tony. Tony uses a grenade launcher-equipped weapon on assassins outside his office, killing many of them. Tony is wounded twice by the remaining attackers, but he continues to taunt them until Sosa's right-hand man, the Skull, fatally shoots him from behind. Tony's body subsequently falls into a fountain below, in front of a statue bearing the inscription "The world is yours," which Tony had observed on the side of an advertising blimp earlier. And this is where the movie comes to an end. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, until next time.